Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling a really difficult case. It forces this, well, brutal confrontation between medical science and deeply held religious belief.
We're talking about the real-life tragedy of Anneliese Michel in Germany.
Exactly. It's a story where you see psychiatric diagnoses, ancient rituals, and sadly, legal negligence all just collide with absolutely devastating results.
Yeah, our deep dive today is into this pile of source material, really, that gives radically different views on the same, 9 months of absolute horror.
Right.
We really need to meticulously compare the timeline, the medical diagnoses versus the timeline of the spiritual intervention. Our mission really is to pull out the verifiable facts. Things like the family background, the specific symptoms she showed, the relentless schedule of those 67 exorcisms, and then the manslaughter trial that followed. Just understand the full scope of what was, frankly, a monumental failure.
Because when you look at the raw evidence, I mean, the photos, the autopsy reports, those incredibly chilling audio recordings, the core question just jumps right out at you, doesn't it?
It really does.
Was this a tragedy rooted in maybe misplaced faith and religious fanaticism that blocked vital medical care? Or was it a catastrophic failure by medicine to even recognize the full scope of the suffering that, well, some people still insist was supernatural?
That's the heart of it.
Okay, let's try to unpack this. So, before Anneliese became this tragic figure in legal and religious history, she was, by all accounts, just a quiet, intensely polite, and very devout young German Catholic woman.
Yeah, the evidence presented at the trial really painted this picture of devotion that, well, it almost bordered on compulsion, attending Mass twice a week.
And we should probably clarify, Mass isn't just, a casual church service.
Well, not at all. It's the absolute central sacred ritual in Catholicism. It's where the bread and wine are consecrated and beliefs become the actual body and blood of Christ.
Representing his sacrifice.
Exactly. So, attending Mass multiple times a week like she did, that shows a really profound active commitment to the core mystery of the faith.
But that intense level of religiosity, it didn't just come out of nowhere, did it? It wasn't just her personality.
No, it was heavily influenced, maybe even enforced, by a very charged, deeply serious family environment.
Right. She had 3 sisters, right? And both parents were devout. But the mother, Anneliese Michel, she was known to be exceptionally strict, rigid, even.
Bordering on fanatical in her observances, yeah. And what's really fascinating here, and obviously crucial for understanding the context of Anneliese's later breakdown, is where the mother's extremism came from.
Yes.
Our sources detail this internal source of profound guilt and, importantly, public shame for Anneliese Michel. She'd become pregnant before marriage.
And in their community, conservative, post-war German Catholic that was highly disgraceful, almost unforgivable.
Absolutely. So the mother's intense religiosity wasn't just, simple faith. It was almost like a form of penance, a constant seeking of atonement for what she saw as a profound personal error.
A life defined by self-punishment, really, and this desperate need for divine forgiveness.
Precisely. And that seriousness, that rigidity, was then imposed very strictly onto the children. Anneliese Michel essentially treated her daughter's upbringing as a kind of continuous spiritual repayment for her own past.
Wow.
And Anneliese, being naturally sensitive and, compliant, she internalized this pressure intensely from a very young age.
So she grew up almost equating suffering, strict rules, maybe even illness, with being spiritually good.
It seems that way. And the sources confirmed this rigid, high-pressure environment was just the norm for them. Everything seemed stable, if maybe a bit stifling, academically, socially.
Until she turned 16.
Exactly. Then that rigidity, combined with the sudden onset of these physical and mental symptoms, just created a perfect storm.
So, 1969, Anneliese turns 16, and that stability just completely shatters. She starts having these severe seizures, mostly at night.
And these weren't just, typical full-body convulsions you might picture. They were focal seizures, often accompanied by intense, really terrifying visual and auditory hallucinations.
The symptoms were complex right from the start, weren't they? She'd hear these distinct abusive voices. She said they were piercing her ears.
And often coupled with this strange, compelling physical urge to just rack back and forth for hours, hugging her knees.
That combination, the physical seizure activity and the really profound auditory disturbance, that's why her parents initially went the psychiatric route, right?
So they took her straight to a psychiatric hospital in Würzburg. The doctors there, they pretty quickly diagnosed her with temporal lobe epilepsy, TLE. It affects, the temporal lobe of the brain.
Right.
They sent her home with standard anti-seizure medication. But, looking back at the records, it seems the medical team then really focused on the physical seizures.
And maybe downplayed the other stuff.
Possibly dismissed the more subjective, terrifying auditory and visual things as just secondary effects.
And that seems like a critical failure point, doesn't it? Because TLE is known for causing symptoms that can mimic psychological or even, supernatural experiences.
Absolutely. The temporal lobe is involved in processing memory, sensory input, emotion, all of that. So focal seizures there can trigger olfactory hallucinations, strange, often foul smells that aren't really there.
The smells. We'll get back to those.
And intense auditory hallucinations too. The doctors, it seems, maybe failed to recognize the mental health escalation beyond just the initial TLE diagnosis.
Because the symptoms didn't stay static, they escalated, and rapidly. In 1970, she had a second major seizure attack.
And the hallucinations got dramatically worse. It wasn't just voices anymore. She started vividly seeing this specific terrifying thing, a face, she said, that was claw-marked and snarling at her.
Wow.
And this is the period where her behavior really crosses the line from maybe manageable neurological symptoms into something looking much more like profound psychosis.
Her eating habits. The testimonies called them animalistic.
Yeah, she developed pica. Started eating completely inedible, dangerous things. Insects, spiders off the floor, coal, even ash scraped out of the chimney.
I have to pause here. The detail about hiding under the dining table to chew on the heads of dead birds, that's just almost too horrific to fully process.
It is. It points to a complete break with reality, doesn't it? Deep, deep psychological distress.
We're looking at severe mental deterioration here, possibly, as you said, schizophrenia or some other profound psychosis layered onto the TLE.
And the extreme behaviors just kept coming. She developed this destructive obsession with her own blood. She'd deliberately make deep wounds on her body with her fingernail.
And then lick the blood.
Compulsively lick the blood, yes.
And this is exactly the point where her previously intense religious devotion just completely flips, right?
Completely reverses. She became terrified of anything sacred, stopped going to church, stopped participating in any rituals. She claimed something unseen was physically holding her back.
And when she tried to pray,
the voices, the auditory hallucinations, they just intensified. Swearing at her, insulting her, "You're dumb, you rat in hell," things like that. Friends even reported seeing her physically collapse near the church door. Like her knees just gave out as she got close.
So between 1970 and 1972, the deterioration just becomes acute. She starts expressing clear suicidal thoughts.
And justifying it with this sacrificial narrative that kind of mirrors her strict upbringing, doesn't it? Believing she needed to sacrifice herself to atone for the sins of the wayward youth and others.
The doctors saw the depression, they added medication for that, but the core complaint.
The root complaint remained unaddressed. And that core complaint was the constant presence of demons. She insisted they were in her room, insulting her, swearing at her all day long.
And this was compounded by those horrible smells you mentioned earlier, the olfactory hallucinations.
Exactly, like rotting flesh or burning dung, burning feces. Those are actually often reported in complex TLE and psychotic episodes.
The self-harm also became more violent, more externalized. She started repeatedly bashing her head against the wall.
Until the wall itself was visibly red with blood, according to reports.
And eventually that violence turned outward, towards her family.
Yeah, they reported her ambushing them from behind doors, scratching, biting. The whole family dynamic just disintegrated to the point where they were forced to physically isolate her in her room. They were scared for her safety, but also for their own. So by 1973, you have this family facing a daughter who was just unrecognizable, violent, utterly miserable, and years of medical intervention haven't seemed to help.
So they made that fateful shift in perspective.
They did. They concluded medicine had failed. They became absolutely convinced she was possessed, not just sick, and that only, divine energy, divine intervention could possibly save her.
They immediately started seeking out priests, but the sources detail this initial, almost unanimous pushback from the church hierarchy.
Right. Germany's Catholic Church was, and still is, generally pretty skeptical about possession claims. They often demand proof that all medical and psychiatric options have been completely exhausted.
So priests were refusing to perform the ritual.
Yes, repeatedly, often stressing she needed ongoing medical treatment. They recognized the potential danger, I think, of prematurely jumping into what they likely viewed as primarily medical crisis. Some also reportedly sensed a real danger, a powerful darkness around her.
And this resistance went on for 2 years.
2 full years, yeah. Which really shows how stringent the German church's protocols were. The breakthrough, the real turning point in the whole case, happened in 1975 when Father Ernst Alt visited Anneliese at home.
That moment, it's cited constantly as the definitive religious confirmation, even before he identified himself as a priest.
Her reaction was immediate and incredibly violent. She started to shriek, scream, violently turning her face away from him, as if just his presence, his spiritual presence alone, was physically burning her.
Father Alt later testified he felt something physical too, right?
He did. He described feeling a palpable physical resistance, like an immense cold pressure that actually prevented him from fully entering her room.
And crucially, Father Alt confirmed the possession. He noted her screaming often contained this cacophony of voices.
Sometimes sounding like dozens of men shrieking all at once, yeah.
So, based on that confirmation, Father Alt had to navigate the church bureaucracy.
Exactly. Performing an exorcism without explicit permission from the local bishop, who was Bishop Stang at the time, was absolutely forbidden under the official Catholic rite, the Rituale Romanum.
But he eventually got it.
Finally, in 1975, he received the necessary approval, and that marked the official start of what became known as the series of the Great Exorcisms.
And the two priests who took this on were Father Ernst Alt and Father Arnold Renz.
That's right.
The very first ritual, September 24th, 1975, it was immediately horrific. We have the witness accounts, the audio tapes. They describe it vividly.
Anneliese screamed gutturally. They said it sounded like a dog barking or growling. She thrashed so violently on the bed.
Like a fish out of water was one description.
It took 4 grown men just to hold her down adequately.
And the self-abuse continued even during the ritual, pulling her hair, tearing her skin.
It didn't stop, no. And the behavior was overtly anti-religious. When Father Renz held up the crucifix, she spat directly on it.
And the test with the holy water, that's one of the most cited proofs by believers, isn't it?
It is. The sources claim that when holy water was sprinkled on her, she screamed in these inhuman voices and swore constantly. But the reaction wasn't just sound.
Right. The parts of her body the water touched apparently jerked violently.
As if the holy water was literally burning her skin. That's how it appeared to the witnesses.
It really speaks to the intense conviction of the priests and the parents that this wasn't just theatrics or, psychotic behavior.
Absolutely. And then there were the claims of physical strength. Just staggering. She reportedly became uncontrollable, somehow managing to jump with the entire heavy bed she was tied to.
At one point, she apparently overpowered her mother and tried to strangle her.
Yes, requiring both Father Alt and Father Renz to physically intervene and pull her off.
Let's pause on that claim of superhuman strength for a second. Doctors would attribute that violent thrashing to the sheer power of TLE-induced seizures, maybe fueled by adrenaline and psychosis.
That's the standard medical explanation, yes.
But the priests documented 4 strong men struggling to restrain her. How did the sources really reconcile that discrepancy? I mean, the medical experts tend to dismiss it, suggesting adrenaline in a terrified, malnourished body can still produce short bursts of incredible power.
But for the believers, it was definitive proof of external demonic assistance. That's the core unresolvable conflict right there. To the medical side, it's physics and biology under extreme stress.
To the religious side, it's supernatural power.
Precisely. And during that very first session, the source material notes that the entity or entities provided this terrifying, sacrificial justification for Anneliese's suffering.
Yes, she spoke that sentence, saying she had to die to atone for the wayward youth of the day and the apostate priests of the modern church.
Which really suggests that the narrative of religious sacrifice, arguably planted by her strict mother years before, had fully matured in her mind into a rationale for self-destruction.
And right after she said that,
Immediately after, 4 distinct guttural voices reportedly screamed from her stomach area, "We won't leave."
wow. That must have confirmed for everyone there that they were in this protracted violent battle with multiple really entrenched entities.
That's certainly how they interpret it.
So this one incredibly intense session, that was just the beginning of the descent. Over the next 9 months, 67 of these exorcism sessions took place.
Each lasting roughly 4 hours, sometimes performed twice a week. It was relentless.
By October 1975, the demons started identifying themselves, giving it this terrifying structured layer.
Yes, Anneliese, or the voices speaking through her, claims she was possessed by 6 distinct entities, and the names are chilling. Lucifer,
The ultimate fallen angel. Hitler, which is so specific and culturally loaded.
Judas Iscariot, the betrayer of Christ, Cain, the first murderer, Nero, the Roman emperor infamous for persecuting Christians, and Fleischmann, a disgraced priest known for betraying the church.
Doesn't the specificity of those names, especially Hitler and Nero, figures tied to German history and Roman tyranny, suggest less of a timeless, universal evil and more of a projection? Like a projection of cultural trauma and her own deep psychological distress. Why Hitler specifically?
That's an excellent point, and it's exactly what the medical sources latch onto. The presence of Hitler suggests a profound internalization of recent German historical and moral trauma. If the voices are coming from Anneliese's tortured subconscious, then these names are psychologically meaningful, not just random evil spirits.
But for the priests?
For the priests, the specificity confirmed these weren't just random entities, but spirits associated with specific historical evils, forced to reveal themselves.
The battle wasn't just physical then, it was intellectual, psychological warfare too.
Absolutely. The demons, or voices, spoke in different tones, often taunting the priests. They used deception-like. They'd briefly convince the priest they'd succeeded and left.
Only for a man's voice to suddenly scream out, "I will return!"
Followed by the whole group shouting, "Nobody can drive us out!" Just pure psychological torment for everyone involved.
This took a heavy toll, obviously, but the linguistic phenomenon is equally disturbing, isn't it? Anneliese, educated in this small German town,
Suddenly starts speaking languages she had no formal training in. Hebrew, classical Latin, ancient Greek, even Aramaic, the language Jesus likely spoke.
Now, okay, maybe some Latin bits of Aramaic could have been absorbed passively through high-level Catholic liturgy, but speaking them fluently, that's a whole different level.
It really is. And she would also seem to fight them internally. Witnesses heard her ask the voices, "Why are you here?"
And their only reply was,
Simply, "So. Just so."
chilling. And after these exchanges,
Following these dialogues, witness testimonies repeatedly describe her falling to the floor and twisting her body into this physically impossible crucifix position. Her body was literally becoming the stage for this horrifying spiritual war.
the most tragic part of this period, though, from late 75 through mid-76, has to be the complete stopping of all medical help.
Totally. The family committed entirely to the twice-weekly exorcisms. They believed any pill, any medical intervention was an affront to the spiritual process, that it would interfere.
The physical toll, it's just unimaginable. Her mother apparently documented seeing nail marks, stigmata-like marks on Anneliese's hands.
Equating her daughter's suffering directly to Christ's crucifixion, which only reinforced that religious sacrifice narrative that was driving their negligence, really.
And the level of physical self-abuse is just staggering to comprehend. From March 1976 onwards, she completely stopped eating and drinking.
Blaming the demons prevented her, but she maintained this furious physical ritual, genuflection,
Kneeling rapidly over and over.
hundreds of times a day. Sources suggest between 500 and 600 times daily. Just think about the mechanical friction, the intentional impact, on the same points of her already skeletal body over and over.
500 or 600 times a day, on bare knees, on a hard floor, without food or water for fuel or repair. She was literally consuming her own body.
The sources confirm her knees were worn down to the bone. Literally, they would bleed constantly just from being touched.
Her body must have been experiencing massive muscle wasting, severe dehydration, bone trauma.
Everything was failing. And she also continued to bash her head on the floor, losing several teeth. She bit the walls. She created fresh, deep claw marks on her own cheeks and face every single day.
By June 1976, she wasn't just ill. She was a young woman actively, deliberately destroying herself under the most extreme physical and psychological duress imaginable.
All with a spiritual rationale overriding every basic instinct for survival.
June 30th, 1976, the 67th and final exorcism. By this point, Anneliese's physical condition was clearly terminal. The sources describe her as a living corpse.
She literally lacked the muscle mass to stand on her own. Her parents had to physically lift and support her frail frame throughout the ritual.
She had wasted away to just 31 kilograms. That's only 68 pounds. Her face. The descriptions are shocking. Eyes sunken deep into their sockets.
Lips and body covered in open, infected wounds, bite marks, self-inflicted scratches that just wouldn't heal. Her face was described as being locked in this fixed, twisted mask of agony.
And even during that final session, the violence didn't stop. She reportedly hit her hand so violently against something that all her fingernails broke off.
She repeatedly rose and fell onto those exposed, bleeding knees, creating actual puddles of fresh blood on the wooden floor. Her breathing wasn't even breathing anymore. It was this rattling groan.
And the sources noted exposed bone on her cheekbones, suggesting she'd internally bitten off her own cheek flesh.
That was the interpretation, yes. Just horrific mutilation.
Her last words, recorded in a voice barely above a whisper, they're heartbreaking. She managed to say, Biddleversburg, please forgiveness. Asking forgiveness from the city.
Then she looked at her mother and just said, simply, "Mother, I'm afraid."
Oh, God. The final sounds on that evidence tape before the session ended. The guttural, demonic noises just suddenly stop.
Replaced only by her faint, trembling breaths. And the final recorded sentence from her was apparently, "Leave me, I want to go."
Anneliese died in her sleep that night, July 1st, 1976. She was just 23 years old.
Her mother found her body the next morning, completely slack, eyes half open, black clots of dried blood near her mouth, her facial muscles locked in a final spasm.
And tragically, the parents later said they felt immediate relief, believing she was finally free from the demon's torture.
That's what they stated, yes. Which tells you everything about their mindset at that point.
Her death immediately became a massive national scandal in Germany, didn't it? Forcing the legal system to confront this collision of religious practice and medical neglect head-on.
Absolutely. The court case hinged entirely on the undeniable physical state of her body. The skeletal weight, the shattered knee bones, the evidence of prolonged starvation, the extensive self-inflicted trauma.
The priests, Father Alt and Father Renz, they submitted those audio tapes, 14 or 15 of them, as their central proof of possession.
They did. And while the court was reportedly profoundly disturbed by the sounds on those tapes, the guttural growling, the shrieking, the multiple voices, some observers apparently had to cover their ears.
But ultimately, that audio evidence was dismissed as scientifically unverifiable.
Correct. The priests, though, remained utterly convinced of their spiritual interpretation, even victory.
The judge's verdict, however, cut right through all the religious noise with stark clinical clarity.
It did. The court determined, unequivocally, that had timely medical care been provided, meaning basic nutrition, hydration, hospitalization, Anneliese Michel would still be alive.
The official cause of death:
starvation, severe dehydration, and terminal pneumonia resulting from her weakened state.
The ruling established a really crucial legal principle, didn't it?
Yes. The court stated very clearly that faith is personal, but the preservation of life is a universal legal duty. And that duty had been violated by both the parents and the priests.
So they were all found guilty of
manslaughter by negligence.
Can you elaborate on that specific legal term? Manslaughter by negligence sounds incredibly serious, yet the sentence, 6 months in prison, suspended for 3 years probation, seems almost light given the horrific state she was in.
It really reflects the judge's immense difficulty in balancing two things. The German Constitution, which guarantees religious freedom, against the fundamental law of the land, which is to protect life.
So negligence means they didn't actively intend to kill her.
Exactly. But their failure to act specifically, their failure to call a doctor or force-feed her when she was clearly dying, directly resulted in her death. That's the negligence.
And the short, suspended sentence.
It indicated the court recognized that the parents and priests were operating under a genuine, though tragically misguided religious conviction, rather than actual malice. They were still held legally responsible for the fatal outcome of their actions and inactions, regardless of their spiritual intent. So the court's legal verdict provided a kind of closure, but it utterly failed to resolve the profound, deeply disturbing questions about the actual source of Anneliese's suffering. Medically speaking, the explanation is pretty clear-cut, isn't it?
Right. Her initial temporal lobe epilepsy caused the focal seizures, the involuntary body twisting, the first hallucinations. That seems straightforward enough.
And the escalation, the really extreme, bizarre behaviors like eating insects, drinking your own urine, the severe self-harm that points directly towards a severe, tragically untreated psychological disorder, most likely schizophrenia, or perhaps another form of acute psychosis developing on top of the epilepsy.
The demonic voices she heard become textbook auditory hallucinations. The horrible smells were olfactory hallucinations, which we know are linked to TLE.
And medical experts are adamant that her death was purely clinical. Multiple organ failure caused by systematic starvation, and the sheer debilitating physical strain of the rituals, especially those hundreds of daily genuflections and the constant self-bashing.
From a medical standpoint, she was a fatality of untreated illness compounded by horrific neglect. Simple as that.
Tragically, yes.
Yet, despite this seemingly comprehensive medical and legal conclusion, certain elements from the source material just continue to defy easy categorization. They keep fueling the supernatural debate.
And the most compelling piece of evidence, always cited by proponents of the possession narrative, remains those audio tapes.
Yeah, they're still available online.
Yeah.
And the quality of the voices, it is genuinely disturbing. They often sound truly inhuman, like multiple beings speaking and shrieking simultaneously.
It really lends a kind of chilling credence to the priest's claim of hearing dozens of men speaking through her. It's a physical sound phenomenon that still shocks anyone who listens to it today.
The priests also claimed they witnessed other physical phenomena, things science struggles to explain happening inside that sealed room.
Right. They repeatedly reported that the ambient room temperature would drop suddenly, noticeably, during the peak intensity of the exorcisms.
And they personally felt things.
Yes, sudden, localized cold sensations, sometimes even described quite specifically as feeling cold fingers pressing against the backs of their necks while they were performing the ritual prayers.
And the sense of something other. It didn't end with her death, did it?
No. According to local accounts, villagers reported hearing strange whispering noises near the family house afterwards, and noted a persistent, strange, unpleasant odor emanating specifically from her gravesite in the months following her burial.
But the ultimate sticking point, the claim that just forever keeps this case from being neatly filed away and forgotten, happened 2 years after her death.
That is the single most enduring and frankly unsettling element of the whole legend. The mother requested the body be exhumed 2 years later. Now, the official forensic records are complex and heavily debated.
But the widely accepted claim, stemming mainly from family testimonies and circulated reports,
Is that when the coffin was opened, 2 years after her death and burial, Anneliese's body was reportedly found to be absolutely fresh, as if she had died only the previous day. No significant signs of decomposition.
which is scientifically impossible, right? Decomposition, especially given her extreme dehydration and malnourishment before death, should have been rapid and pretty much complete within 2 years in normal soil conditions.
It is scientifically impossible under normal circumstances. Now, forensic experts generally attribute such rare claims when they occur to specific unique soil conditions like peat bogs or adipocere formation, or sometimes less frequently, to simple anecdotal misreporting by emotionally invested observers.
But the impact of that claim,
The impact on public and religious opinion was massive. It immediately undermined the court's definitive, rational ruling. It suggested to believers that the spiritual forces at play had somehow fundamentally altered physical reality, or maybe that her body had been miraculously preserved for some higher purpose.
it forces you to ask whether the legal system, dealing only with negligence, ever truly grasped the full, bizarre phenomenon they were judging. #Take outro. So the court judged the case of Anneliese Michel as a devastating medical failure, compounded by religious negligence that clearly violated the legal duty to preserve life. That's the official record.
Yet the persistent physical evidence, those incomprehensible audio tapes, the linguistic feats she reportedly displayed, and that scientifically challenged claim of the fresh body, 2 years later, it just leaves the line between severe sickness and something truly sinister. Well, deeply blurred.
Ultimately, this case really serves as a heartbreaking, almost cautionary tale, doesn't it, about how societal context rooted here in religious guilt, family fanaticism, and this overriding spiritual interpretation of suffering can tragically and fatally override scientific reason and basic care.
Yeah, and regardless of where you personally stand on the spiritual versus medical debate, the undeniable consequence was the devastating, agonizing death of a young woman who was fundamentally failed by every single authority figure around her family, medicine, and the church representatives involved in the exorcisms.
Anneliese Michel may have found release in death, but the source material, the story itself, suggests things were left behind. Those haunting questions, the terrifying tapes, maybe even the physical phenomena that science still struggles to definitively dismiss or explain.
It leaves us asking, doesn't it? If that body truly defied the known laws of decomposition 2 years later, does that mean the case is maybe less solved than the court declared?
Was the body preserved because the spiritual battle, whatever it was, wasn't truly over? It's a genuinely terrifying thought to mull over as you go about your day.